Harry was never university material. He had covered himself in glory as a sportsman at Eton and had been parade commander in the combined cadet force, but academically he struggled. When he left school at 18, he had just one goal in life: to join the army. But first came a gap year of his own, which he and Mark Dyer devised between them. They went to Australia, Africa and Argentina, and it was during the trip to Africa, to the tiny mountainous kingdom of Lesotho, which has the third highest rate of HIV/AIDS in the world, that Harry discovered where his true talents and passions lay. The people in this beautiful but impoverished country were slowly being wiped out. In 2000, King Letsie III had declared the pandemic a national disaster, and the country's #1 enemy. There were then an estimated 4,000 orphans and vulnerable children in a country of just 1.8 million, most of whom were in denial about AIDS. Harry's itinerary was arranged by the king's brother, Prince Seeso, but he spent some of his 2 months in the country working with AIDS orphans in the Mansase Children's Home in Moheli's Hook. He was incredibly moved by the plight of the children. He played with them, he taught them English, he built rooms, put up fences, painted walls. All the children loved him but, in particular, one little 4-year-old boy, who followed him like a shadow, wearing a pair of big blue Wellington boots Harry had given him. In another home, a 10-month-old baby girl, raped by her mother's boyfriend and so badly damaged she had to have her womb removed, lay motionless in his arms. She couldn't even cry. Witch doctors tell men that they will be cleansed if they rape a child, the younger the better. For all his hell-raising, Harry has a deeply compassionate side to him and the most remarkable affinity with young children. He found it impossible to walk away from these children when his time was up, step onto an aeroplane and get on with his life of plenty without doing something positive to help. During his first week in the orphanage, a photo call had been arranged for the media, and one of those who went out to Lesotho was Tom Bradby, ITN's royal correspondent. He had also done some filming of William during his gap year and was a familiar figure at royal events. He had come to know Mark Dyer very well, and both Mark and Colleen Harris identified him to William and Harry as the presentable face of journalism, someone they could trust. They did various bits of filming together and he got on well with them both. After the photo call, he persuaded Harry to let him make an exclusive documentary about Lesotho to highlight the country's plight. The result was an extraordinarily powerful and touching film called The Forgotten Kingdom, which was shown on ITV in Britain in 2004 and sold to America for a large amount of money. An appeal was launched off the back of the film and all the money raised was used to found Centabale, which means, Forget Me Not, Harry's charity, of which Prince Seeso is co-patron. Some of the shots in the film were taken by Harry himself with the video camera he used to record his gap year. Tom had looked through all the tapes to find suitable clips for the documentary, and finding a lot of it very funny, offered to edit them into a video as a present for Harry. The next time Tom saw William, William said he had seen the video and thought it was great, so Tom offered to do the same for him. Trusting Tom completely, as Harry had done, he handed over all of his own, very private, tapes, which Tom spent several days turning into a video. Having crossed the Rubicon, Tom was then trusted with all sorts of confidences and both princes would ring and ask his advice from time to time. Harry's oldest and possibly best friend, Henry van Straubenzee, whom he'd known since his first day at Ludgrove, had also planned to work with children in Africa on his gap year. He was heading for Uganda, where his elder brother Thomas, William's contemporary and close friend, had gone on his gap year 2 years before. But Henry never made it. He was tragically killed in a car crash just before Christmas 2002 at the age of 18. Henry had spent the first few months of his gap year between Harrow School and university working at their old prep school. He was going to Newcastle to read business studies, sponsored by the Mod, having won an army scholarship. After Newcastle, he would go to Sandhurst, and possibly his father's old regiment, the Royal Green Jackets, now the Rifles, continuing a family military tradition that hadn't been broken in over 150 years. His future was mapped out for him. More immediately, he was going home to Hertfordshire and after Christmas was flying to Uganda. The term was over and they were having a farewell Christmas party that had gone on way past midnight. In the early hours the sound system gave out, so he and a friend nipped down the school's long narrow drive to borrow a CD player. His friend was at the wheel and in the fog on the way back, doing no more than 27 miles per hour, the car hit the only tree in the driveway. Both boys had been drinking, neither was wearing a seatbelt and the car was old and had no airbag on the passenger side. Henry was killed instantly and his friend gravely injured. He was the first friend of William and Harry's generation to die and both were intensely shocked and upset. They had lost their great-grandmother earlier in the year, also Princess Margaret, and while both deaths were immensely sad, they had had a good innings and neither of them had been well. Henry was young, handsome, healthy, mischievous and happy, with everything to live for. His death was as sudden and senseless as their mother's. They knew the Van Straubenzes intimately. The boys all stayed at each other's houses. The princes had been on family seaside holidays with them. For years, Henry's parents, Alex and Claire, had taken a house on the cliff top at Polzeth in North Cornwall, as they still do, and every year they took a gang of boys, each of their 3 sons inviting their closest friends. William and Harry were always part of it. William as Thomas's friend and Harry as Henry's. They went surfing with boogie boards, William always going out further than anyone else ever dared, and shrimping in rock pools. They played French cricket on the flat sandy beach, and barbecued and partied into the night. Thomas and Henry had been to stay with William and Harry at home and on holiday more times than they could count. And if Diana was not there, Tiggy would look after them all. They'd been to Highgrove and, before Diana's death, to Kensington Palace, which they adored because Diana was always such fun. Thomas Straubenzee is one of the very few friends the princes have now who knew their mother. The brothers had been on the super-luxurious Alexander, the 3rd biggest yacht in the world, which the late Greek shipping tycoon, John Latsis, used to lend the Prince of Wales. They had wonderful, wild boys' own holidays in the Mediterranean, jumping from the highest deck into the sea. By coincidence, the Vans, as they are known, were friends of the Spencers. In 1979, Alex had shared a flat with Diana's sister Sarah, and Diana had been the charlady, one of several domestic jobs she did when she first came to London. Alex and Claire heard the news about Henry at 4:30 in the morning. They were asleep in bed when the headmaster of Ludgrove telephoned to tell them the news every parent dreads. Their son was dead. Numb with shock and grief, they quickly organized what they imagined would be a small family funeral for him on the 23rd of December in their local parish church. To their amazement, and comfort, people kept ringing and asking whether they could come. In the end, 350 of Henry's and his brother's friends squeezed into the little church, including William, Harry, Tiggy and 2 of the prince's PPOs who had regularly been with them in Cornwall and knew Henry well. The following month, Harrow School held a service of thanksgiving for him in the school chapel, to which 1,000 people turned up, including William and Harry. The Vans say that both boys were hugely kind and supportive to the whole family, but particularly to Thomas and his younger brother Charlie, who was only 14 when Henry died. With their own experience of loss still with them every day of their lives, they were able to understand better than most the pain their friends were going through. They are all still very close, still go to Cornwall and elsewhere together and are all determined to keep Henry's memory alive and make his death less senseless. After the memorial service, Harry went back to Eton, William to St Andrews and to Kate Middleton, who was instinctively empathetic. Where most of his male friends would hide in safe subjects like sport after a perfunctory acknowledgement when anything heavy was in the air, she was prepared to engage in conversations about feelings and delicately probe and allow him to unburden his soul a little. This was not the first time he'd had difficult emotions to cope with during his time at university, and it wasn't the first or the last time she would be there for him.